Today in the EU, EPP power play set to shape Commissioner hearings outcome. Commissioner-designates hearings are kicking off this afternoon, and unlike past hearings, this round appears dominated by the European People's Party, EPP. With 26 nominees lined up for review, each parliamentary committee will have the opportunity to scrutinise the candidates' expertise and suitability for their roles. These hearings, while intended to assess competencies, are also likely to reflect underlying political alliances, rivalries, and strategic scheduling that could impact the outcome and timeline of each appointment. In the background, the EPP is poised to leverage its position to push through favoured nominees, ultimately shaping both the composition and the agenda of the incoming Commission. Hello and welcome. I am Evi Kiorri, and this is Today in the EU. To look into the hearings, I'm joined by our politics reporters, Magnus, Lund, Nielsen, and Nicoletta, Ionta. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
So the Commissioner-designate hearings are kicking off this afternoon. Who will be opening this lengthy process?
So today we're starting a very busy week. Indeed, the hearings will start today and they will continue until Tuesday next week. But we don't know if, there is going to be more for us to witness. But yeah, today the hearings, we will hear from Slovakia's Commissioner-to-be Šenkovič, the Malta's commissioner, and the commissioner for Luxembourg, Hansen, as well as the Greek commissioner, Apostolos Tzitzikostas.
And Magnus, is it better to be the first or last in the hearing order? And was the schedule randomly decided? Could you also walk us through the process a bit?
Yeah, so the order in which the different commissioners designate are being heard is not at all random. That is indeed the product of a very lengthy and quite, at this point, fairly highly politicized process. The thing of it is that you want your commissioner to be cleared as soon as possible. So you want them to be first in line. With the scheduling that we've decided on now, it's going to be all the junior commissioners up first, which sounds like, well, this should be pretty fair, but it actually very much plays into the hand of the European People's Party, the EPP, the biggest grouping in the European Parliament, because they have the most junior commissioners. So by doing it this way, they will have many of their commissioner nominees in the clear as soon as possible.
And why is this rush to having your commissioner designates cleared out first?
The thing is that when you have your commissioner coming up last, their political life, I should say, still hang in the balance. Because while some socialists might feel like voting no to some junior commissioners, some junior EPP commissioners, for instance, the Spanish Teresa Ribera, who is a candidate for one of the executive vice presidencies of the European Commission, she's going to come up last. So they know that if they vote down a junior EPP commissioner, there is a clear risk that the EPP might just retaliate and then vote down their own candidate.
And Nicoletta, some commissioner-designates are drawing significant attention. Who are they and why?
I mean, there are many names that were floated in the past weeks of people that maybe would not make it or they could be facing a hard time in the hearings. Of course, a name that many people had in mind. And when we talk about this is the one from Italy, the commissioner from Italy, Raffaele Fitto, because he is basically from Fratelli d'Italia, which is Meloni party, of course. And many had much to say about the fact that he comes from a party that didn't support the von der Leyen Commission. And many are wondering whether he is actually the right fit for commissioner in the sense that he will need to prove his adherence to the European values, which is something that, according to what my sources have told me in the Regi committee, which is the committee that will hear Fitto and that will assess him based on, of course, his knowledge and on his portfolio and everything, what people are wondering is he the right fit? Like, can he represent the European Union in that sense?
Magnus, you also mentioned some other names last time you joined me on the podcast. Is the picture looking different this time?
The still current Belgian Foreign Minister, Ajay Labib, has appeared in many conversations I've had with people in the parliament as a name of a candidate that isn't the strongest card. She has some things in her past. In her capacity as foreign minister, she has been involved in a visa scandal, handing out visas to Iranian officials, and also in her former life as a journalist, she was invited, as you understand it, with Russian money to Crimea, and in the immediate aftermath failed to recognize Crimea as part of Ukraine. She has since then set the record straight, but she's a name that comes up as a potential weak spot. And one thing that's interesting to mention maybe in this context is that we earlier mentioned the EPP being a force to be reckoned with in the hearings here. They might just choose to play politics with, for instance, a Haji Labib. That is not necessarily to say that they're going to reject her, but what they can do is that when she's being heard, immediately after that, the committees who have been vetting her will meet and decide whether is she going to pass immediately or is she not going to pass. If she doesn't pass immediately, they can choose to call for an additional hearing. And that additional hearing, because of time constraints, obviously, will have to take place a week after. So that's to say, after all the other commissioner nominees have been vetted. The point then being that she's not in the clear yet. So again, the Liberals will know, okay, we still have our guy's political life hanging in the balance here, and might just feel inspired to let maybe a veto, as Nicoletta mentions, go through.
You mentioned a little bit already the power the EPP can have regarding the decision-making, but in what ways can the EPP shape these commission hearings, besides the case of Haji Labib that you already explained to us?
Of course, as we said, and as Magnus also mentioned, EPP is interested in getting it done as soon as possible and to get the commission running. But yeah, the EPP is actually showing that this is an EPP parliament. And we have seen it during the last 2 plenary sessions in Strasbourg, that the EPP is basically choosing the people that the EPP wants to work with. And so we have seen a shifting balance when it comes to majorities. We have seen what now people in Brussels are calling the Venezuela majority, which is basically based on the vote that happened in Parliament during the last 2 plenary sessions when it came to choosing the winners for the Sakharov Prize and when it came to actually deciding and recognizing the president of Venezuela. So EPP decided to vote with the right side of the spectrum, which of course it's a deviation from what the actual majority that supported von der Leyen Commission is.
I'm very curious about the closed-door evaluations of commissioner-designates, maybe simply because of the closed doors, but what impact can this have on the outcome of their hearings?
What happens next week is that all commissioners-designate, that is to say all the incoming commissioners, are being drawn through each their personal 3-hour-long grilling sessions, where they have to sit down in front of sometimes one, sometimes several committees being fried by members of the European Parliament. In the immediate after such a hearing, the political leaders of these committees who have been grilling said commissioner will convene and decide on what's the next steps. And essentially, 2 things can happen. Either the coordinators, that's the EP lingo for the group leaders in the committees, find out that there is at least 2/3 of members backing this candidate, and so this candidate is in the clear. If that doesn't happen, then there's alternative. The alternative is that you either write additional written questions for the nominee, or you call for an additional hearing. The little caveat to that is that the leaders of the European Parliament altogether has to greenlight an additional hearing because you need to allocate more time and room and the whole thing, right? Or they can, if they don't want to go to written questions, or they don't want to go to an additional hearing, they can ultimately just go directly to a vote in the entire committee. Again, such a vote, as I understand it, would also have to take place after all the other hearings have taken place, because you need to get then sometimes if it's more than one committees, then it's several hundreds of MEPs together in the same room and vote on the fate of this commissioner. And in that case, it's not 2/3 you would need to be cleared as a commissioner designate. It's just a simple majority, and it's a secret ballot. So you could, in that case, much like when we saw a few months ago when Ursula von der Leyen was voted through Parliament, you could see that some groups might say, well, we don't like Fito if Fito should get to an actual vote in the entire committee he's being heard by. But they might, in the end, choose to vote for him anyway, because we'd never know. It's a secret ballot.
Mm-hmm. And from all that you're sharing with us, it really sounds to me that we will see some political power play taking place here. But how likely are political alliances and rivalries among parliamentary groups to affect the order and approval process of commissioner candidates?
I mean, we have seen power play happening when the entire list of who was going to be heard first was decided. But now during the hearings, I mean, as we said, I think EPP is the king and will be the kingmaker when it comes to actually approving the commissioners and setting, the stage for the next commission. As we said, this is an EPP commission, and this is looking like an EPP parliament because of the numbers, because of course, EPP has the power to decide what goes through and what doesn't. So I don't see much happening in terms of rivalries or like alliances. It's more like the EPP will decide. And of course, there is, leverage in who is going to be there first and who is going to go through the hearings and the grilling process first.
And just to add to that, it's been a slow week. So what I've done for the last couple of days is just walking around the parliament and shaking trees and see.
And no one was there. Just the APAs are there.
Yeah, exactly.
The ones that are so unlucky to be there.
Yeah, but it was interesting to talk to assistants, because obviously the assistants to members of European Parliament also tend to be on top of things. And one thing that sort of have occurred to me is that this is not only the EPP expecting this to go through fairly easily. Point being that a lot of the other parties, be it on the right, be it on the left, expect this to be over pretty quickly. For the parties on the left side of the hemicycle's part, they recognize that, well, they might not like a Fito, or they might not like Hungary's Vaheli, but they also recognize that if they vote down a Fito, or if they vote down a Vaheli, well, then Orban or Meloni is going to come up with another commissioner-designate, which is probably going to be of the same sort. So, I mean...
If not worse.
If not worse, if you ask them, right? So the point is, there might not be a whole lot to win by voting down some of the controversial nominees.
It is actually true, like 100% what Magnus said. Also, when it comes to Fito, what my sources are saying from every single side of the spectrum is, if not him, then who? Because... there is no one else that Meloni could propose that has the same, let's say, political gravitas that Fito has, and the same political background, because he was an EPP man.
Right, and if you had to highlight a few key things for us to keep an eye out for during these hearings, what would they be?
The end of the hearings.
Yeah, so I think one thing I'm going to be looking out for, especially, is how are these evaluation processes, these meetings where coordinators, the group leaders in the different committees, taking place just after hearings, how are they going to unfold? Because it's kind of a black box. One thing I failed to mention before is that this evaluation taking place just after the hearings, when the coordinators meet, they are taking place behind closed doors. So we don't really know. But one thing I'm going to be looking out for is what the decisions being made there are going to look like. Is it going to be a postponement? Are we going to have additional hearings? I think that's going to be really interesting to see, because as both Nicoletta and I have been hinting at, it's quite likely that maybe the EPP, maybe also other political groups, but I'm looking to EPP whether they are going to take maybe a liberal like Le Pip, or maybe a socialist like Dan Jørgensen, of a name I've heard being floated around, sort of taking as hostage in the sense that they will call for additional hearings taking place after, and sort of postpone their possible clearance to after all the other commissioners designated have been cleared.
And it's also interesting to see that, for example, Ribera, which is the Spanish commissioner-to-be, she's the last to be heard. So we're also looking out for that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is not necessarily her hearing, but it's interesting. It's because she is placed indeed in the end.
Yes.
It's going to be interesting to see how the socialists behave when they have to vote on a Fito, for instance.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Magnus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am Evi Kiorri, and this was Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on all streaming platforms. You can get in touch with us by leaving a comment or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your reviews help us a lot to spread the word about our work, but also understand what topics you like listening to. This episode was produced by Miriam Saenz de Tejada, Charles Cohen, and me. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the long weekend, and we will be back on Monday morning. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.